Welcome in, folks, to the latest edition of Panthers news in the offseason. It is the slowest time of the year. It's going to pick up soon, but we do have a few storylines that came through. We're going to give you an update on Jonathan Brooks and his surgery. It was finally completed. We have some details coming out about that. We've got two new players that were signed to reserve future contracts. We'll tell you who those folks are. And then we have a fun topic to talk about, and it has to do with a former player for the Carolina Panthers and Frankie Luvu. And Joe Person of The Athletic went on the Kyle Bailey Club, and man, there's a clip that I'm going to play for you guys, and it kind of changes the entire narrative that we have had around this whole topic of Frankie Luvu choosing to leave Carolina for a better scheme or fit, which was likely the case. But there's some new details provided by Joe Person that I think we have to discuss. So we're going to start at the very top here, getting a breakdown. And guess what? This news coming directly from Joe Person as well. I know a lot of beat writers and reporters reported on this, but I bookmarked this tweet. So I'm going to use Joe Person to give you some insight. So renowned orthopedic surgeon Neil Elatrot, hope I say that right, performed Jonathan Brooks' ACL surgery last week in LA per source. I think he's one of the best in the world at this surgery. So they did not play any games at all. I believe the last time Brooks had a surgery, it was the Cowboys physicians that did this, and a lot of people had thoughts that that's where he would land, is in Dallas, but it never happened. I'm sure Jerry Jones potentially grateful that that did not pan out. Who knows? We have some additional notes, though. It was a successful surgery, and again, on his ACL, remember that Brooks, the second-round pick out of Texas, was injured on a non-contact play versus the Eagles on December 8th. Joe Person originally said he's expected to miss all of the 25 season, which we all said yes, that's probably the case. Did get some clarity, though, that there is the possibility for a return. So the Panthers are not going to rule out that Jonathan Brooks will not make a return late in the season. But I think as Panthers fans, just knowing what we just saw, unless there's some competitive football and maybe you're talking playoffs where he makes his debut, and playoffs is a whole nother topic to get to, but I don't think the Panthers should rush this. I mean, you're talking about a year from now. I mean, he just had the surgery last week. So, I mean, you'd have to be past the wild card into the divisional round, possibly, to have a return. So that does open up the discussion around what the Carolina Panthers should do at the running back position. A lot of people are talking about the draft, and should or could the Panthers draft another running back? I do think it's a possibility. I know they've already started to talk to at least one back. It's being reported by Ryan Fowler, who does a great job of consolidating all the visits that happen during the offseason, because a lot of those come through. But for the Carolina Panthers, I do think they are going to consider it. I mean, one way or the other. Draft or free agency. And to be honest, the free agency draft class isn't great. I also know Miles Sanders is still under contract. I'm okay, believe it or not, with bringing back Miles Sanders, assuming you can restructure him and get him on a cheaper deal. If not, I think he walks, and then you can find someone else. And there's not many people to bring in, but there is still value at the bottom of the later rounds. Like we've seen 4th and 5th and 6th round people hit on those picks. So that's my thoughts. I'd love to know what you guys think. Are you a fan of them drafting a running back or not? Speaking of acquisitions and additions for the Panthers, again, they added 2 players to future contracts, tight end James Mitchell and outside linebacker Carlos Boogie Basham, who was a former second-round pick out of Wake Forest. He was also with the Bills in 21 when Dan Morgan was in Buffalo. And that's fine. We need depth. We need outside linebackers. We need edge players. But we also know that Dan Morgan's last pick that he brought down with him, I should say, from Buffalo and Dane Jackson was not it. So I'm hopeful that this Buffalo connection is a little bit better. Just a slight bit of improvement. But again, this is the point where you're just building out your roster. So instead of having, 20 undrafted free agents that you bring on, maybe you only bring on 15 because you got a few more veterans, younger players, but guys that have already been in the NFL to build out your 90-man roster that you take to camp. And then you hope that one or two or three or four of these guys pan out and end up having a chance to make the roster down the road. Now we're going to get into a fun discussion. And one shout out to Panthers on Tap for pulling this. They got the clip, so we're going to play the clip that they pulled. But also shout out to the Kyle Bailey Club, WFNZ, Charlotte Sports Radio. I listen to those guys all the time. Did not listen yesterday. I actually started listening to the beginning of this interview. Then we went into the grocery store, so I did not get to hear the end. But there was a bit of information around Frankie Luvu that came out. And so what I'm going to do is play this for you guys, and then we will react. So here you go.
Is that a black eye on this defensive, system? How Giro Evero, the fact that both Jeremy Chin and Frankie Luvu are flourishing up in DC?
Well, certainly on Chin, but he had some opportunities in this system and didn't play real well. But the Luvu thing, the narrative, kind of the easy narrative that kind of got out there was like, well, the Panthers offered him more money. He didn't want to be here anymore. Now, I don't think that's accurate. I think the Panthers got in late with a late offer. And at that point, there was too much momentum going down the road to Washington as to going up the road in this case. So, I think they thought they could get Luvu and keep him, just because he liked being here. And again, they eventually got to the number where Washington was, and maybe a little more, but it was late in the process, and that ship had sailed.
So, folks, there you have it from Joe Person, and I think that is the narrative we've all believed this whole time, which is a little different than that, is that we offered him more money, that we were ahead of the game. But no, as you could hear there, Joe Person reporting that the Panthers were late to the game. And to me, that's an indictment on Dan Morgan as a GM. How do you let your best player on defense outside of Derek Brown walk? How are you not there at the forefront knowing what he can do? I mean, you look at the season he's having in Washington, and it's been very successful. How are you not at the table ready to make that happen? I don't get it. I do not. And maybe that's part of the reason that we've talked about Dan Morgan taking a lot of the blame. But man, you can't let your good players like this, even approach free agency. You got to be ahead of the game. And I understand they had to battle through, think through what they were going to do with Brian Burns, and they gave him the franchise tag. But I think the Panthers fumbled this situation away, like hands down. It was not even close. But it's frustrating, and I do agree on the front of Jeremy Chin, and I've talked a little bit about it. I'm fine that Jeremy Chin left, but I think it also speaks volumes to Ejiro Evero's lack or inability to use Jeremy Chin in an effective way, because we saw Jeremy Chin have a fantastic rookie season. We also saw some great performances, and then it all went downhill, and he could not figure out how to use him. And I know Chin didn't play great at times, but you look at what he's doing now in Washington and a team that's in the NFC Championship, and you just question, if you can't manage those two guys or these guys want to bolt, what makes you think you're going to want to bring in others, especially coming off the worst defense in Panthers history, most points allowed in NFL history? The accolades on the defense on the wrong side of the equation are not looking good for the Carolina Panthers. But anyways, folks, that's going to do it for today's episode. This is Carolina Dad. Y'all have a good one.